Let's get back into continuing with our CMS sketch. So I just opened up Fusion 360. I have an untitled design like I always do. And then over here in my data panel, if you forgot how to get into your data panel, remember it's this waffle at the top. I'm going to find my Learn Fusion project, and there it is right there. I'll double click on that. And in there I can see my CMS folder. I'll double click on that. And in my CMS folder is my CMS sketch. I'll go ahead and double click on that. And there we go, we've opened it up. I'm going to close my data panel so I have a little bit more room on my screen. And to get back into a sketch, I'm not going to push the Create a Sketch button. That will make a new sketch. It will not let me change the sketch that I already have. So the way that we do that is we find the sketch down here in the timeline or up here in the sketches folder. It's the same sketch. I'm going to right click on either one of those and I'm going to choose Edit Sketch. And there we go. There's the work that we created so far. So just as kind of a reminder, we made a rectangle and we made it 50 millimeters high. And then we said this side of the rectangle from side to side should be twice the height. And then we took the side to side length and we split it up by 3. So we created this dimension down here and this dimension down here. And then we took we took a rectangle and we made it into a construction and made sure each side of that small rectangle was 5 millimeters away from any edge, and that gave us 3 little boxes. So what we're going to end up doing is we're going to draw the letters inside of these boxes. So let's go ahead and start with the letter C. The way that I'm going to do this is I'm going to go here to the Create menu, and I am going to choose Point. So we've created a point, and I am going to just make sure that this point lives on this construction line. Now, we have been just putting a point down like I did right there, and then using the coincident constraint to ensure that it lives on that line. And that's something we can do. I'm going to hit Control Z though to get rid of what I just did. Fusion 360 is nice because it also has automatic constraints. Let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to click on Point, and as I'm traveling down this construction line, you can see that my mouse turns from a black X to a blue X. That means that it is wanting to auto-constrain. And the constraint that this one automatically would be is that coincident constraint. It would make sure that the point lives on this dotted line. And if I keep going down, you will notice that a little blue triangle appears next to it. If I click there, you'll see that triangle ends up there. That triangle is this midpoint constraint. So the point that I just drew right here has 2 constraints placed on it, you can see. Well, actually it's 3. One constraint is the midpoint. That means this point has to live at the midpoint of this line, which also means that it's coincident to that line. The other constraint that I can see right there is that vertical constraint. That means that this point is vertical to one of these corners. And as a matter of fact, as I come down here, you can see that vertical constraint kind of turn on the dotted line. All right? So I'm going to hit Escape to get out of my point. We are going to mess around with some circles now, because isn't a C most of a circle? So I'm going to click on Create a Circle. I'm going to bring it into this first box, and I'm just going to draw a little bit of a circle. I'm going to keep it inside of that box. Okay, that's all I really need to do. Now we're going to use this tangent constraint, which is up here. What a tangent means that I have a line or a point that's touching a circle in exactly one point without ever going inside of the circle. So let's see what that does here. So I'll go ahead and I'll say, all right, let's take this tangent And we're going to make sure that this circle is tangent to this construction. And if I zoomed in a lot, I could zoom in forever, and it would always appear as if that we're just getting a little bit of the circle touching that line. As a matter of fact, that circle touches that line in exactly 1 point. And that dotted line does not go inside of the circle. I still have my tangent tool open, and what we're going to do now is we're going to say, okay, this circle also needs to be tangent to the left-hand construction line. Okay, so that means that the left edge of this circle basically is going to be touching this line. And then I'm going to do one more tangent. I'm going to say this circle must also touch this bottom line. And you can see now it is locked into place. Right? I cannot change anything about that circle. It is a black circle. And this is going to be the basis of our letter C. All right, I'm going to hit escape to get out of my tangent tool. I'm going to go up here to modify. I can either go into modify or I can click up here. We're going to use the trim tool, which is the letter T on the keyboard. So I'll go ahead and do that. And what I want to do is I want to cut away any part of the circle that's outside of this drawing box, which is that little rectangle on the inside. So I will start just cutting away those parts of the circle. And there we go. We have cut away all those parts of the circle. And there is the beginning of my letter C. That looks very much like the letter C to me. So what I could do is I could maybe draw another circle or something like that around the center of the circle right here. You can see there's the center of the circle that we just made. But I want to show you a fun new tool, and that is called the offset tool. Let's go up here to modify, and you can see offset right there, or if I go into the modify menu itself, there's offset, and it also has the letter O next to it, so I'll just hit that on my keyboard. I will click on that letter C, boom, and look at this red line. This is called an offset. It's going to make the exact same shape, but in a different spot and at a different size. So you can see I can drag it out, or I can even drag it in. And it's a little bit of a bummer right now that right here in this window you can't see the number, but if I go over to the offset menu over here, you can see that right now it's offset by negative 2.6. That means there is 2.6 millimeters of space between the blue line and the red line. Well, I want there to be 5 millimeters, so I'm going to type in -5 and hit enter. And there we go. We have the inside part of the line. Now, I want the letter C to be a closed shape. That means when I hover my mouse over it, I should only see the letter C. I'm hovering my mouse over it right now, and it's highlighting everything inside of the rectangle. That means the letter C is not a closed shape. Think of it like filling it up with water. We don't want any water to spill out of the letter C. So I will use a line. I'll hit L on my keyboard. I'm going to go over here to my sketch palette and make sure construction is turned off. I don't want a dotted line. I want a real solid line. And I'm just going to connect these C ends over here like that. Okay. And my line tool is still open, and I'll go this end here to this end there. And then I think I'm done with my line tool. I'll hit escape. And now, when I hover my mouse over it, I have a closed shape. Fusion 360 calls this a profile. So right now, I have a closed profile, which I can later turn into 3D objects. Keep that in the back of your mind. All right, in the middle box, let's draw the letter M. That's going to be pretty simple. I'm going to take this line tool, or just L on my keyboard. I'm going to make sure that it is still a solid line. And I'm only going to draw half of an M and use the mirror tool to do the other half. Remember, I like doing half of things and letting Fusion 360 do the rest. So M is going to be pretty simple. I'm going to start with a solid line in this corner. I'm going to follow the dotted line up to that corner. And you can see there's the one side of the M. And then I'm just going to click in that corner that I just made, and I'm going to auto constrain it here. Or am I? No, let's do something else instead. I'm just going to set that off to the side. Okay. I hit escape to get out of my line tool. I'm going to open up the line tool again, but this time I'm going to do a construction. And I'm going to go from the middle of this box, which is the origin, and I'm going to auto constrain it right there to the top line. And I'll hit escape. If I go over to my blue line right here, it's blue, so that means I can move it still. I'm going to grab the end of that line, and I'm going to auto constrain it to this, and I'm going to wait until I see the midpoint. Boom, triangle, midpoint. And now my M goes right to the midpoint of that line, and I think that's a very nice looking M. Again, I'm going to use this offset tool to draw the thickness of the M. So I'll click offset, and if I click there, you can see it's selected everything, and I'm going to start dragging it, but I will type in over here. This time it looks like a positive number, so I'll type in +5 because we want the M to be the same thickness as the C, and I'll click but before I click OK, let me look over here at my line type. It's a construction, so I'll turn off construction. And there we go. Now I have a red line. This is where it's going to be. I'm going to click OK. I'll take my line tool, L, and I'll just go ahead and connect the bottom parts of the M. Then I have one more issue over here. We're going to use the mirror tool, and this dotted line that we created, that's going to be our mirror line. But this part of the M is not touching our mirror line. So let's go ahead and do that. We can click on that dot, and I can make sure that I have the right constraints. So you can see I snap in down here that my line has these kind of two blue lines that appear. That's what we call the collinear constraint. And I'll just show you that for real. So I'm just going to connect this to that line somewhere. That's ugly. This is not a straight line. What I could do is I have a constraint up here that would force this blue part to be in a straight line with this black part. That's called the collinear constraint. So I'll go up here to collinear, and I will choose collinear. I'll go up here to constraints, and I'll choose collinear. And I will say, okay, this blue part has to be collinear to the black part. And boom, that forces it straight in. Okay, I'm going to hit escape because I'm done with the collinear constraint. I am ready to mirror. So just like we did before, I'll go and choose the mirror constraint. If you can't see it there, it's also in create. And what do I want to mirror? Well, I'm going to select all the parts of the M that I have so far. And remember, there's two lines here. And then I'm going to choose my mirror line. See, I clicked on that to make it blue. And that mirror line is the dotted line that we created. And before I click OK, I want to make sure all of my lines make it to the other side. And I'll click OK. It looks like all my lines made it over there, except they didn't. Oh no, I forgot the up and down line. I accidentally mirrored the construction line instead of the solid line. So I can either use the line tool and draw that line, or I'm going to try to mirror it again. Maybe just because I'm stubborn. Okay, our objects. Okay, there we go. There's the solid line. I wasn't paying attention before. And then the mirror line is still that dotted line. I'll click OK. And there it is. I have a solid line over here now. And I can tell because when I hover my mouse over it, I see a closed profile. All right, let's go ahead and do this S. I'm going to do this in maybe kind of an interesting way here. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to bring open a line. And I'm going to make sure that it's a construction line. And I'm going to draw that construction line from this corner on the right-hand side all the way up to the midpoint. Okay, and then over here I'll do the same thing. draw it from this construction line all the way to the midpoint. And then I'll do one more construction line. Click here and go to midpoint, or sorry, all the way to the other edge. And then I'm going to open up my points. Let's go ahead and start adding some points here. The first point I'll add is right here, just somewhere on this line, kind of by the corner. The next point I'll add is I will go until I see the midpoint. There's midpoint, there's my triangle. And then I will go over here and I'll do midpoint here. And then I will go, you can see right now, there's that little blue mark on my screen above my mouse. That means I have a horizontal vertical constraint. So, right, or a vertical constraint. So I want to make sure I have a vertical constraint against this point and then another one on this point. And don't worry about the distances, we'll fix that in a second here. And then over here, I want a midpoint over there. And then somewhere on this line, I just want another point. And I think I'm done with all of my points. I'm going to hit escape and let's go ahead, get out of the point tool. We are going to dimension these up right now. So I'll hit D. This might be a little weird right now. Trust me, it'll make sense. But for these corner points, I'm going to go from the point to the corner. I want that to be 5 millimeters. And from these three in the middle, I want to go the one on the top to the one on the bottom. That should be 5 millimeters. Also, the distance from that midpoint to any one of these endpoints should be this 5 divided by 2. Okay, and what that does is it forces these ones to be this equal distance from the midpoint. And then I'm going to go down here and I'm going to say this point needs to be 5 millimeters from the corner. And we're going to add 2 more dots. I'm going to go to create and do point. I'm going to kind of bring it over this one and then draw it to the side so that I get a horizontal constraint. And then I'll do the same thing over here. So I see that dotted line and get my horizontal constraint. And I'll bring my dimension tool back with D on my keyboard. Okay, and I will do 5 millimeters there, 5 millimeters there. And believe it or not, we have an S waiting for us. All right, so you can kind of imagine if I were to trace a curvy line from this point to this point to that point to that point all the way to the corner, that's kind of like the bottom part of an S. And we have a really fun tool that lets us draw these nice curves. And this fit point spline up here, it's under create, and then I go to spline, and then I go fit point spline. So let me show you how it works. So I'm going to start with this bottom point, and it will start, oh, I have construction turned on, so I'll go over here and turn off construction. I'm just going to bring it down, and it doesn't look like anything curvy yet, but once I click on this point right here, you can see it starts to make a curve, and I can control that curve by how thick it is. And we've already controlled that curve with some predefined points, so I'm going to bring that curve down right here to this top one in the middle, and then I'm going to bring it to this one on the side, and then I'm going to bring it all the way to the corner. And then after I click my last dot here, I'm going to hit the Enter key on my keyboard to lock it in. And I'm going to draw the top of the S now. Uh-oh, we have a little bit of an issue because this S should be black. That means one of my points is not fully constrained. I'm going to be careful. I'm just going to take this, I think it's probably these ones here. I'm going to take and force that horizontal constraint. So I'll go, you must be horizontal. There we go. There we go. See, that fixed it. And then I'll say the same thing here too. I should have known when I was making these points, it just gave me a dotted line. It didn't show me the horizontal symbol. I should have known. I'm sorry about that. But now I have forced them to be horizontal, which locked the line into place. I'll hit escape because I'm done with that constraint. And I'll go back to my fit point spline, and now I will do the top of the S. So I'll click here and click here, and I'll click there and there and there, and I'll hit enter. And there we go. And it's not a closed profile yet because these ends of the S over here at the top and the bottom are open. So I'll bring my line tool and I will close them up. I'll hit escape to exit, and let's kind of zoom out, and there we go. We have a CMS. Yes, there are lots of ways that I could do the same thing that are so much easier than what we did. But remember, the point of what we were doing here is that we learned about some of our sketching tools. So as kind of a review, we used center rectangles, we used regular rectangles, we used solid lines, we used the dotted construction lines, we used the dimension tool, and then we even did some dimension functions using the math to make them twice as big as something or 1/3 as big as something. We used a lot of our other tools like mirror and offset and trim. We used horizontal vertical constraints, we used coincident constraints, we used tangent constraints, we used midpoint constraints, we used a collinear constraint. So this one project introduced us to a lot of our tools. Some of these will make sense how to use right now. Some of them you might need to practice with a couple more times, and that's okay. But we're going to do some projects where you kind of take what you know and start making your own things. All right. I love doing this. I'm so glad that I get to teach you guys how to do it. Thank you so much. Remember, show me this when you're done.